Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of Art Side of Life, where I chat with inspiring artists and create various art related videos. My name is Eva, and my guest today is Victoria Ying. And in this episode, you will learn awesome tips for building your portfolio and how you should prepare it for the big studios.
I'd really recommend looking at art of books, and that way you can really see what the taste of the studio is. If you look at an art of book from Dreamworks, it's completely different than an art of book from Pixar. And it's not just like a book thing, it's actually the art directors who are picking those pieces that go into the book. So this is a good way for you to kind of feel out the taste of the studio that you're going for.
Victoria is an author and artist living in Los Angeles. She started her career in the arts by falling in love with comic books. This eventually turned into a career in working in animation. Victoria's film credits include Tangled, Wreck-It Ralph, Frozen, Paperman, Big Hero 6, and Moana. Her current work focuses on storytelling with her debut picture book Meow and many other novel and graphic novel projects in development. So please welcome Victoria Ying and let's get to the interview. Welcome everyone to the next episode of Art Side of Life, and I'm super happy to have Victoria here. Hi!
Hi, how are you guys doing?
Perfect. I'm super glad that you joined us here, and let's just start directly with your background, and maybe you can share some creative outlets what you had as a child, and when was the time when you decided, okay, I want to take this professionally?
Great. So I was always really interested in art when I was a kid. I kind of had a talent for it, but I never really took it seriously until high school when I started getting really into comic books. I really started reading the Japanese manga. So like Ranma One Half was my favorite manga when I was in high school. And the thing I loved about it was that it was this creator-owned story. Like she was the writer and the illustrator, and it felt very much like a personal piece of artwork that we were able to kind of participate in. And at that point, it's when I realized it's like, oh yeah, this person, this is their job. Like, this is what they do for a living. So I decided then that I really wanted to pursue art. Mm-hmm. And in high school, I started taking art classes outside of school just to try to see where in the arts I wanted to be. I think I thought I wanted to be comics, but my mom was very of the mind that I should explore and kind of see what else was out there. So I took classes in like product design and graphic design and all kinds of things, basically just to kind of get a taste for like what the professional art world looked like. And then I realized I really just love drawing figures. I love drawing people and telling stories that way. So I ended up going into illustration when I went to school. So illustration was such a great program at my college art center, College of Design, because it really taught you like the fundamentals of communication. Mm-hmm. And then I was lucky enough to be able to be part of a new minor program that specialized in entertainment design. So that was really cool, and it was really helpful for me to see that like the job that I wanted in comics, like although it was a little more difficult to achieve back then, like there was a way for me to tell stories with pictures, and that was through concept art. So I went through that program, and then I started pursuing animation after that.
And so how was it for you, to go through the program, and kind of like how were you selected for it, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe how did you land your first artistic job? Because sometimes it's really like, okay, do you apply? Do they find
Mm-hmm.
you? And
Yeah, for sure. So for the program, it was an application process, mm-hmm. and it was really interesting because I thought I had to be really, really great at my skill set before they'd accept me. But it kind of turned out that they had a very open mind about what they wanted. And they were much more interested in people who had good ideas more than necessarily the skills, because, they figured it. So even though I wasn't super confident in my portfolio when I applied, like they definitely saw something and accepted me to the program. And then after I graduated, my first job was at Walt Disney Imagineering, mm-hmm. which if you hear that name, it sounds like I worked on the parks, but at the time they were actually trying to develop I guess what we now call mobile games, like casual mobile games.
Something
But back
interactive,
then,
right?
interactive and like web based and for kids. And at the time, like they didn't have a particular division that was making that. So then it kind of went to Imagineering. So I was there just developing this game with them, doing characters, backgrounds, like a lot of the same stuff that I ended up doing for the big studios. And then I was there for about a year, and I knew about this Disney training program, and I had applied when I graduated, but I didn't get it. And then I decided to try again because you have 3 years from when you graduate in order to get it. So I applied the second time, and then the second time with a new portfolio and some more new work, I actually got accepted. So that's how I got started at Disney.
Oh, perfect. And I'm sure like a lot of people from the audience, they would be more interested as well. Like, okay, well, how do I prepare the portfolio? If you have some tips, like what is important and what the people look for.
For sure. So biggest portfolio tip if you're looking to go work at a big studio like Disney or Dreamworks or Pixar is to kind of know what they're looking for. I'd really recommend looking at art of books, and that way you can really see what the taste of the studio is. If you look at an art of book from DreamWorks, it's completely different than an art of book from Pixar. And it's not just like a book thing. It's actually the art directors who are picking those pieces that go into the book. So this is a good way for you to kind of feel out the taste of the studio that you're going for. Like, for example, DreamWorks tends to be a little bit more detailed and more realistic and very rendered. And if all your work is like pastel drawings and stuff, it probably isn't going to be a good fit there. But if you look at Pixar's work, like their stuff is a little looser, it's a little bit more color and feeling based. So if that's something that you think that your artwork has, then that might be a better place for you. Or let's say that you could do both those things. Then it's a good way for you to start honing your portfolio per studio. Yeah. I think that's the other thing too. I would really recommend doing your research and having a portfolio for each studio instead of just having one portfolio, because everyone's looking for something different. And in order for you to really tailor your work to the place that you're applying, like I wouldn't recommend applying to Disney with like, gruesome monsters or like, girls in bikini armor, like it's not really a thing that they make. And even though you might do that really well, it's probably, not something that they're going to respond well to.
Yeah, and would you also separate portfolios for a character design and the environment art, like maybe viz dev and concept and all of that if you decide to, for example, apply to Disney?
I think that really depends on you as an artist. That's definitely something I get a question about a lot. And because I'm someone who does both, I was considered a generalist at the studio. I was never like a character designer, but I was viz dev and sometimes I did characters. The people who are character designers strictly, that's all that they do. And I think if you're going to be general viz dev, at least at Disney, because we have that perspective, I think it's really important to be able to draw characters, not necessarily as a designer, but to communicate with them. So, like, I find that some of the most effective viz dev pieces are ones that have characters reacting and have storytelling in it that way. So, if you want to be more of a generalist, I would kind of put in both. But if you're kind of looking to be a character designer, then I would maybe just stick to characters. And I think that the overall thing that I want to stress is actually don't put anything in that you didn't love making, because if you get hired for that thing, then you're going to hate it. So, there's that. And then the other part of it is that you're only as good as the worst piece in your portfolio. And people can tell if you didn't like making it. Like you think that, oh, it looks pretty good. And yeah, maybe it does. But I think that, as an audience, you can always sense if the person who made it had fun or if the person who made it like enjoyed that. So like I actually looked at a lot of portfolios when I was working at Disney. And one of the things that would always stand out was like when people would put in something that they just didn't care about, but someone told them that they had to have in their portfolio. Like, I don't know, like someone had an environment, but they were clearly a character designer. And I felt every time that I saw that, it was always like, oh, like
Why?
you'd feel stopped and you'd be like, oh, like, do you think this is good? Because your other work is great and this is just kind of okay. And then it kind of brings into question your taste. Like, do you know what's good? And I think that that ends up being a problem. So I think that, like, if you're a character designer and you don't like doing environments, don't put them in. And if you're a environment designer who doesn't like doing characters, like, don't put them in because they're going to stick out like a sore thumb. Because if you're really good at environments and you're kind of so-so at characters, like, hide that. I always kind of think of a portfolio as like a first date, you know? It's like you want to put your best self forward. You want to be yourself, you know? You don't want to pretend to be someone you're not, but at the same time, it's like you want to put forth the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And there are also people discussing sometimes like, oh, should you put description, what you actually meant by this piece, or would you just put solely like just artworks?
Personally, I like to look at art of books not just for their informative aspects, but also for their graphic design. Most illustrators are not graphic designers. We are bad at putting images on a page. You know, like, we don't really understand what we're making in terms of a flat piece of graphic art. So I always like to look at the art of books as an example for, like, here's how to arrange pictures and words. And words are actually really helpful because I think they break up the page. And I mean, honestly, like, when we were designing the book for Lovely, I made everyone write descriptions of their art, and a lot of people were like, well, I don't know what to write about this. And I'm like, I don't know, just say that you like the color purple. Like, I really don't care, but we need chunks of text in this to make the page look good. Like, it's like a balancing thing. And for me, I think that, you know, I recommend putting text in, but not necessarily for the text's sake. Like, I don't know that anyone's going to read it, but I do think it helps make the page look nice and helps kind of make it feel like a finished piece. Like, because you're making a book, like, essentially a portfolio is a book. So if it feels more like a real book and less like just a bunch of images put together in a, you know, like a photo album, I think that makes you feel more professional and kind of puts you higher and puts you more on the same playing field as all the other, you know, artists who have been working for a decade, even if you don't necessarily have as much artwork. That's the other good thing about it too, is you can kind of pad your portfolio a little bit with text. But again, like, this is something you have to kind of do delicately, because, like, if you kind of ham-fistedly just put text in it, it's not going to look good either. So, yeah, I know it's a weird kind of answer, but that's my personal feeling.
It totally makes sense, because also, as you mentioned, it looks more professional and it's more like a final product, basically. So you're presenting like a book and layout, and it's all kind of goes together, right?
Yeah, totally. And, you know, one of my biggest criticisms of people's book is always flow. You know, it's like, do you understand the way that the person who's reading this is going to consume it? It's like, you may think that you put your best pieces in here, but is there a rhythm to it? And, like, when you're looking at a real book, like a art of book, you can kind of see the way that they break up a page from, like, oh, here's a page of sketches, and now here's a full page spread of a beautiful painting, and now here's like 4 different little color pieces. And I think that's also a good thing to reference when you're making your portfolio, just so that way when someone looks at your book, that they feel that they're not looking at like 80 pages of sketches in a row. You know, it's like you kind of want to keep them interested. Like, it's almost like a song.
Yeah. So you can have some kind of order and, as you said, logical flow to the whole thing.
Yeah, totally.
And what helped you the most, maybe, to develop your art skills? You know, or something when you had like a aha moment, like, oh, if I do this, that everything looks much better.
I mean, I do think that, like, having good mentors was really, really helpful. When I was at Disney in their program, they assign you a mentor, and you know, I just got lucky that the 2 people that got picked for me were just the right temperament and really different from each other. So then it really helped me to kind of develop both sides of my creative personality. I would definitely recommend trying to find a mentor. And sometimes, like, that's hard if you're not, like, in a community that has a big animation network, or if you're not in a place where there's a lot of people who are kind of above you skill-wise. But, you know, I think that face-to-face meeting and trying to network and even creating those opportunities for yourself, like, maybe trying to put together sketch groups or critique groups and stuff like that. I think that that kind of feedback is really great. And finding those people who are your peers and peer mentors are also really important. And trying to find someone who like gets you, because I think that we get caught up in thinking that like all art criticism has the same weight and the same value. But if the person who's looking at your work doesn't understand you or doesn't understand you as an artist or where you want to go, what you want to make, I think that it's really hard to like listen to them on a critical level because they're not really necessarily with you. So I think that, finding a good mentor is really difficult and it's like a long process. But I think that like if you manage to find a good one, then that is just like worth 4 times college education.
Yeah, because then also they can explain you, right, the structure of learning and improving step by step, or pointing out the things which you should work on at that moment, right?
Yeah, and I think that my own mentors, like they got me from 2 different perspectives. So I think that's another thing to consider. Like maybe one of your mentors can really help you with storytelling, or one of your mentors really helps you with your skills. But finding someone who's supportive and really interested in you as an artist, and someone you get along with, I think that that's really important. I've done a couple mentoring programs, like online ones, where you get to kind of get matched up with a mentee and then work that way. And I've had some success with it. But again, it really does feel like this process where it's like sometimes you gel chemically and sometimes you don't. So I think that like having a big network, and, don't necessarily be like, hey, will you be my mentor? Because that's weird. You want to kind of like make friends with somebody who you admire and whose work you really like and who you'd like to emulate. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess that's a really long answer to try to find a mentor, make friends with them, and try to find someone who like really understands you and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, your career goals and kind of the passion you want to pursue, right? Yeah. Before we continue, let's take a little break, because many of you have been asking me about recommendations for different tools and resources to help you out with many different things, like studying, finding inspiration, overcoming artistic block, managing your time, and freelance. So I decided from now on, in the episodes, I will share with you some of my favorite things which help me a lot, and I'm sure they can help you out too. So let's go take a look. So the first one is Audible, which is the largest audiobook store out there with more than 100,000 audiobooks. And I love listening to stories and learning from books, and even if you are not a book reader, this is a great way to get the knowledge and advice from books just by listening. It would be a shame to miss out on all the great tips if you just don't like to read. I usually listen to audiobooks while I'm traveling, doing housework, or painting. It's very relaxing and I learn a lot. What is awesome, you can get free 30 days trial, which is like getting free books. So try it out for yourself and go to artsideoflife.com/audible. The next one is for all the freelancers and studio owners out there. It's called FreshBooks, and it's an invoice and accounting software that is super easy to use and significantly cuts your time needed for invoicing, getting paid, tracking expense, time tracking, and making proposals. Great part about this is that with few clicks you can export all important data for your tax declaration too. And you can get a free trial 30 days to test it out for yourself too. So go to artsideoflife.com/freshbooks. The last one is Trusted House Sitters, and as you maybe already know, I love traveling to refresh my inspiration and avoid art blocks, but my budget doesn't allow it so often. Fortunately, I discovered Trusted House Sitters website, where you can do the pet sitting and live for free like a local. I love dogs and cats and all kinds of animals, so it's great win-win. In this way, it's only about buying a flight ticket or travel there by car. Accommodation is for free and you can have great fun with animals, and you can also draw them and practice your animal anatomy skills. It also works for those of you who have pets and are looking for pet sitters to be able to travel. So check it out at artsideoflife.com/THS. You will find more artistic resources, tips, and tools used by me or mentioned in the interviews at artsideoflife.com/resources. So go check it out. And just to let you know, some of the links are affiliate links, which means I will get paid a small commission if you decide to purchase through them, but at absolutely no added cost to you. And in this way, you get a chance to support Outside of Life, which I really appreciate. And now, let's go back to the interview. And when you mentioned also the networking, how do you do your networking, or everything is from school and the location, or is it as the you mentioned sketch clubs and conventions?
Yeah, oh, conventions are such a big one. CTN is really great for meeting new people and Comic Cons too. It just depends kind of on the industry that you're looking at, but I do think that cons are a great way to network. And yeah, like sketch groups and meetups, those are always really good. It depends though, like kind of on who goes to those. Because like you can have different crowds at each one, and sometimes like if you're in a big city like LA, you might need to like try a couple of them to find like your people. And for me right now, I'm pursuing writing, and so it's a much more lonely kind of existence. So I need that networking aspect because otherwise I'm just like here alone in my office. So like I've really had to reach out and make that a much bigger part of my lifestyle. Whereas like when I was working in a studio, it was a lot easier because we'd just be like, hey, you want to get lunch? Like put together a lunch group and whatever, no big deal. And it's like now it's like, no, it has to be a thing. And, I've learned that it's actually not that hard. People mostly want to hang out, especially people who do kind of lonely jobs like, an artist or a writer, because, so much of what it is not interacting with people. So much is just sitting in front of your computer and producing a thing. And so it's really great to be able to connect and, remember that we're telling stories about people and, we should
sitting at
know
home
people.
all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can't really tell an honest story if you don't like live life. So yeah.
And so how do you plan your day or week, like do you have also like the social events, and maybe do you do something daily which contributes to your success, like meditation or...
I mean, I really want to get good at meditation. I'm just not good at it. Like I'm very easily distracted.
You need a guided one,
Yeah. I've tried some of those apps before. Anyways, I really wish I was good at that. My own daily routine is I do have a bullet journal, which helps me a lot. When I was working in the studio, it was really different because your day was very structured, and I would go in and be like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing today. And then like 15 minutes later, someone would come in and be like, here's what you're doing. And be like, okay, cool. And I wouldn't have to worry about it so much. But now that I'm working on my own and all the deadlines are more spread out, it's like I have to figure out a system for myself because it's just not given to you anymore.
You don't have a project manager. Yeah.
Exactly. You don't have someone who's like, here's what you should be doing, and here's when it's due, and here's when people are coming. So it's kind of like you have to do that for yourself, and it's a learning curve. But yeah, so I do a bullet journal, and I try to do it every morning, and I try to figure out like, okay, here's my projects that I'm working on. And then here are the ones that are due either this week or next week. And then I start blocking out my time based on that. Like maybe I'm going to do Monday morning is going to be for this project, and then Tuesday morning will be for this project. Yeah. And again, this is very much from a freelancer's lifestyle because it's different if you're in a studio. I also try to make time for lunches. Like I try to go out with people, and I try to connect and network and meet with people who I am inspired by creatively. And a lot of times that doesn't necessarily mean people who are doing what I'm doing. I have friends who are screenwriters, and I have friends who are book illustrators, and people who are just doing cool work that I think is really inspiring. And that energy is something that I really need to be around, especially as a freelancer. So, because it's so easy to just kind of end up like, it's fine. Like, yeah. And it's like you need that energy, that spark in order to kind of keep pushing yourself.
Yeah. And how was the transition for you, to go from, like working a lot with the studio work and working on books and all of that?
I think that the biggest transition is definitely the organizational stuff. Like you end up being your own business, and a lot of times working in a studio shields you from a lot of that. Like you don't really have to worry about, oh, when am I getting paid? Or, oh, what time are my meetings? Oh, when is this due? Like you actually have to do all that stuff for yourself when you're freelancing. And I think that transition took me a while. But it's definitely something that now that I've learned how to do it is really rewarding. And I feel like now that I have this system, even if I went back to a studio, I'd probably keep it because I think that it's very efficient and helpful and it makes me less stressed out because I don't have to worry about stuff. I'm like, oh, it's all in the book. I'll just go to the book and be like, okay, here's where these projects are. So, yeah.
And so what are your now incomes or, like kind of how do you combine your income streams, either selling from books or art prints or how do you do the combination?
Well, right now I'm working on a lot of personal projects. I have a novel and I have a graphic novel I'm working on and like a lot of short stories. And, like I'm trying to build something towards a big project that I could sell. And I haven't gotten there yet, but like that's kind of my major investment that I'm putting into it. And I know that it's not like my flow of income is not the same as it was when I was in a studio because I have this different focus. I am still working freelance for books and film and TV, but it's a little easier for me now because since I work from home, I can chunk out my time a little bit better so then I can also focus on kind of my big projects.
Yeah. And then you can also, as you mentioned, like working on the bigger project, you can put aside, I don't know, a year. So you planned on it before, so you can like save the money and like, okay, this is the working time. So
yeah, for sure.
So everything planning in advance.
Yeah, it took me a while to end up leaving the studios, mostly because of that, like just to try to make sure that I knew what I was doing and that I had enough of a like safety net in case things didn't work out. And my first year, actually, or maybe first 2 years, I had this problem where I would take so much freelance that I was basically working a full-time job. Which kind of was like, well, why did I leave? Like, I had benefits there. Like, this is hard. But, this year I'm really working on recentering
balance.
and system work for me instead of the other way around.
Yeah, definitely. And so how does your, artistic process look like when you're creating new art piece or even the bigger project, this book? Like, do you do a lot of, story notes as of written ones, or do you do like sketches or thumbnails or color palettes, mood boards?
I mean, for artwork, if I'm making something that's like based on a story already, like if I have a screenplay and it's like a story illustration, I read through the screenplay and I just try to like feel what the images are that come to me. And a lot of times those come out very fully formed. Like I'm like, oh, I have a very clear picture of what I want to illustrate. And then at that point, I kind of start sketching and trying to make that image fit the one that's in my head. If I'm not lucky enough to have that, then I definitely go into the research. Like character design is something that like is hugely researched and I have to do a lot of Googling and, trying to watch movies. I think that's something that I really try to do is when I try to do story illustration or work on character designs, I try to watch films that not necessarily that look like the thing I'm trying to make. In fact, that's probably not helpful. What is helpful is finding like that personality and that character and what they act and feel like. And that way I get a much more clear idea of who they are as a person and how I want to express that. So that's where I'd start with those types of things. Otherwise, sometimes like if I'm just like, I want to make something, but I'm not sure what, I have huge folders in Pinterest that are just like, these are pretty pictures. And then just looking at them inspires me. And I'm like, oh, I want to go to Paris or, oh, I want to, go into a candy shop or something. So like having that kind of feeling is really helpful too.
Yeah. And then when you are creating some artworks, do you have a, the most important part for you? Is it the layout or the character, or as you mentioned, the feeling, the connection with the audience, or do you try to level everything out?
I think that for me, the most important thing is the story or the emotion, the mood kind of. So if I'm doing an illustration, the main thing I want to communicate is how does the character feel?
Yeah.
So I try to start with the character and I place the character first on the page wherever I feel like it's going to communicate the best, right? So it's like if I want to be looking up at the character, then I sketch the character where I'm kind of in a down view looking up at them, and then I build the environment around that.
Okay.
The environment is not the most important thing because you're not really going to look at it, honestly. You're going to look at the character and you're going to see the environment, but it all has to feed into this one message and mood and story. So like if the story is that I have to think of something, I don't know, like a love story, right? And it's like you want to feel like, oh, this is something where these two characters are meeting for the first time. Like, how do they feel in that moment? And then how do you best communicate that? So I'd first draw the characters, draw kind of their positions and their expression, and then build everything else around that to emphasize that point.
Yeah, because some people also work like from the environment point of view, and then they adjust the characters to the environment, how they interact with the environment. So it's always interesting to see how people think and how they start their process.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And is there something you wish you knew before you started your whole artistic career?
I think that like if I was to do it again, I was a really focused and serious student, and I was really focused on art, and I wish that I had been more open to other things, like not necessarily like not been focused on art, but to experience the world and to be more interested in different aspects of life, because I think that my focus did make everything feel very derivative for a while. And it wasn't until I opened myself up to being like a fully realized person that like I could actually make artwork that was not just skilled artwork, but was also something that had something to say.
Yeah.
So, I didn't get back into reading novels until after college. And I feel like I wish that I'd really stuck with reading and kept my imagination in terms of storytelling really going, even though I was focused on skills. Because I think that in the end has really made me a much better artist, because I'm able to build pictures in my mind, and also reading different things. Like I read a lot of fiction, but I also read a lot of nonfiction, and a lot of my ideas and a lot of the pictures in my head come from, reading nonfiction, because it's like, oh, well, I just finished reading Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, which is like such an interesting book, but also like so many interesting ideas about characters and people and interaction and the complexity of, human relationship. And I think that I wish that when I was starting out, I had more of that. So then I didn't struggle so much when I left school, because I do think that a lot of my artwork and a lot of the artwork I see from new students is very shallow. Yeah. And that depth, I think, is really important to making you a fully realized artist, and it's helpful to, make it so that your artwork actually has something to say.
Yeah. Some message there, and as we mentioned, the connection with audience, right? Yeah. And when we talked about also this, like going through the art career, what would you consider as the most difficult time in your art career? Because usually that's the time where we learn the most. And maybe what was the key takeaway from that story?
So I because I'm such a competitive and focused kind of artist, it was really easy for me to, not easy, but, it was really clear to me how to move forward in my career until I got to a certain point at, when I was working in the studios, where I started to feel like, oh, now what? Like I had this really weird moment where I was out of school. I had the job that I wanted to have, and okay, now what? Like I no longer had a goal. I no longer had a thing to work toward. There was no longer like a time limit. It wasn't like, oh, you have 4 years in school and now you have a 2-year apprenticeship and now you have, this. It's like, well, now this is just it. And I think that was a really tough hurdle for me to overcome as an artist, because just like having those types of very focused, very clear goals was what was driving me a lot. And I think that once that went away, I had to really reevaluate, like, what do I really want? What do I want from my life? And what did I want from my art? And so I think that ended up being kind of a soul searching moment, and one that I am really happy with where I ended up, but it definitely was something I didn't expect.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it's more to research as well. What are your next goals in your art career, right? What do you want to do afterwards?
Yeah, it's like the art career, but also like what do you want from your life? And
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that is something that I don't think we necessarily think or talk about much because it is so hard to make it as an artist. It's really, really hard to get to that point where it's like, okay, well, this is my career now. And I think that like because we end up so focused, because we try so hard to make that happen, it could be really hard for you to zoom out and to see like this is actually my life. And it wasn't I was dissatisfied with it, but it was something that for me, like I was like maybe I was 25 or something, and I was like, oh, okay. And now how do I move forward without a goal? So yeah, that was definitely like a challenging moment for me.
Yeah, yeah, but that's great that you found what do you want to do afterwards, and so that's amazing. And what about like super far, far future? And like what would you like to do in like 5 to 10 years? Like the dream scenario, you cannot fail, and everything is
Yeah.
how you want.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things, and I really want to make I really want to make the storytelling thing work. So, I have my book and I have my graphic novel, and I'd love to get those published. And, you know, it's kind of tough to say because like you don't want to jinx it, but I'd love to actually like see them also reproduced in a different medium. So like if my graphic novel gets made, I'd really like to see what would happen to it as a film or as a something like that. So but I'm just more interested in telling the stories that I have to tell. Like I have so many things that I have so many ideas. Like this year I was writing another novel and I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? And it wasn't like I had to find a story. I have like a list of 50 outlines that are like done. And I'm like, which of these should I make? So it's like, I would love to just be able to be at a point where I could write whatever story I wanted to write. Like if I wanted to write the story that I have about time traveling witch covens, like I just could, and someone would buy it, and it would be good. So, like that's the kind of thing that I'd really like to see.
Oh, that would be perfect. I mean, I'm looking forward to see that.
Yeah.
So I am sure that will happen because you are like so dedicated and you will go for it. So yeah, why not? And if you look to super far, far future, like 100 years, drones flying around, what would you
Oh
like to
boy.
be, remembered for?
I think, yeah, my storytelling. I think I'd like people to remember kind of just the interesting stories that I wanted to tell and be entertained by them and to maybe for them to connect to some people. Yeah.
Oh, that would be nice. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Because when you can have the connection with the story, then everything else like works around it. Yeah. And before we say goodbye and finish, maybe you can share last piece of advice or key takeaway, and then we will slowly end.
Um, I think that one of the big things I'd like to recommend to people who want to get into this field and want to be successful artists is um, be unique and be special. And that usually means being yourself and being yourself in the best way possible. So develop your other interests, like find the weird thing that you're really into. Like if you're actually really into making ceramics, like make some ceramics and try to see like how that can fit into your portfolio in some way, because those types of things, like they change the way your brain works. And that's actually really cool because if you have the same brain as everyone else, then why would they pick you? And if you want to get picked for a job, like you have to be special. You have to bring something new to the table. And you're not going to be able to do that if all you're doing is kind of looking at animation art and then reproducing animation art. So I would recommend like read more, go to museums, find artists who you're interested in who are not working in your field, but who are maybe like sculptors or I don't know, like calligraphers, like artwork that is maybe not exactly what you're doing. So then the input that you have will make your output more interesting.
Yeah, yeah, because definitely everyone also has a different background, and
Yeah.
you can bring all your experiences to that art
Yeah,
as
definitely.
well. Yeah, yeah. So thank you so much again for being here. It was so fun.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks everyone who joined today as well, and see you in the next episode. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe because I post new videos every week. I will be also super happy if you let me know your thoughts in comments and give the video a thumbs up. You can find all the resources mentioned in this episode at artsideoflife.com. Just type a guest name in the search bar. There is also a couple of free artist resources ready for you. So if you want to listen to the interviews on the go too, make sure to check out the podcast at artsideoflife.com/podcast. Continue to inspire each other, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye!